I get just as concerned when I see something very green
Yes, yes.
as red. And you want to be very dramatically freaked out about it in your day-to-day.
I saw an interview with you, and you mentioned that your brother told you you were not cut out to be an entrepreneur.
He did. That was a great moment for me. You know, there was a saying that I'm actually not aligned with, but I hear it a lot. Like, what was it? Work hard,
And
play hard. Exactly. The way I
Well,
look
you
at
can't
it.
play hard if you go to sleep at 9:30 at night. But
Well,
if he's playing
the
hard,
weekend can be a bit different. And it's crazy how efficient
Yeah.
the whole country operates. It's just mind
And
blowing.
of course, you're thinking Amazon. How do I do that?
Absolutely. I mean,
Do you consider yourself a delegator or a micromanager?
definitely the former.
Okay.
And this was this was actually a great learning for me.
Yeah.
During my career. It came a little bit after Amazon. So I think it was about 7 years back. And I remember I had just been promoted within Amazon. And I was, the first thing you do kind of is reflect on, okay, there was a book I read that I remember I still read every time, like there's a change of sorts called The First 90 Days.
Uh-huh.
And
It's a book you refer back to regularly?
I read it like 5 times.
That's interesting.
Yeah. No,
I have a couple of books like that
like
too.
if I get an extra team to look after in Saudi or something, task in AE, I always kind of read that book before you take on that challenge. It's just a good
refresher.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the things was seeking out a mentor, and I seeked out a mentor in the US. Brilliant person. It's on sabbatical now, but absolutely brilliant.
From within the firm?
Within the organization,
yeah.
yes. And one of the things he taught me, which was quite a pivotal moment for me, was realizing what worked for me and got me to where I am is not going to work for me in the future. Just from the sheer scale.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of my time doing 2 things.
Yeah.
One, helping teams realize the difference between a 2-way door decision and a 1-way door decision. And in a nutshell, a 2-way door decision is a decision that you can come back from. And a 1-way door decision, obviously, is there's no coming back.
Yeah.
If I try to give you like a layman term example, think about marketing wanting to test out, a promotion or a shipping fee removal for our Prime members, for instance. A 2-way door decision is, hey, I have the data. About 70% of the math is usually what we look for, and then there's like that judgment call that you have to make. And I'm going to go ahead and test it for duration X with investment Y. Those kind of decisions that you can come back from, it becomes super important that you push that down as far as you can into the org.
Sure.
I shouldn't even know about it.
You shouldn't have to be dealing with that.
I should not know about it.
Yeah.
The moment someone comes to me for approval on something like that, you know that you have a defect in the sense of building an organization that is not fit for scale.
That's right.
That comes from the culture that you're building, from the empowerment that you're doing, from the decision-making high velocity that you're constructing. Then there's 1-way door decisions. Those I would like to know about.
Sure.
You get me? Those become important. If you say I'm going to do free shipping for life, you can't come back from that. So I'd like to be involved in that.
Purely from a time management point of view, you can't deal with everything.
You'll never scale.
And not just you won't scale, you won't innovate, you won't look at the next big thing.
100%.
You can't look to the future. You have to free yourself up for that stuff.
100%.
Yeah.
And in theory, if you're hiring people that are smarter than you, and you're expecting them to come for approvals for decision making, then you're not very smart.
Having talked about that, though, do you consider yourself a detail guy or a big picture guy, or both?
You have to do both.
You have to do both.
Yeah, it's weird when some of the new teams come in and see me in one of our mechanisms called the weekly business review. You kind of go down the list of the different inputs that customers care about. But then when you see something that is kind of sticking out, and by sticking out, it's not usually red. I get just as concerned when I see something very green as red, because that's just a lack of ability in planning.
Exactly.
And on those, you need to be very purposeful of saying, hey, like there's something here, so I want to dive in a little deeper. And we have something called the 5 whys. So, usually if you ask why 5 times, you'll get to the actual root cause. So, just really adopting these mechanisms are important. But then what I typically do is if we find a defect of sort, you ask for the follow-ups. And then you'd almost build like a weekly review for that
Hmm.
topic. So you spend like 3, 4
Yeah,
weeks until you really get sure that
sure,
the teams are
sure.
comfortable, they have all the support they need to
Yeah,
address that topic accordingly. Then you go back out and take that kind of bird's eye view. So you're always like in and
in
out,
and
you
out,
know
in
what I
and
mean?
out.
Yeah.
So I want to get a sense of your early years. So you were born in the US. I know you went to university in Florida. Were you raised in Florida too?
No, I was actually born in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
And I started off at Georgia Tech, and then I finished
Okay.
up my master's at
So
Florida
your
Tech.
parents emigrated to the States?
They did.
They went for as students or
Yeah, no, so
because a lot of Egyptian couples do that, right? They
yeah,
move
no,
to the US.
both were Egyptian. Dad actually finished his degree here, and he was teaching. He's a doctor, a plastic surgeon. Then he moved to the UK, and then he moved to Canada, and then he moved to the US and
Mhm.
kind of planted grounds
And why
and
Atlanta?
started having kids.
They knew people
Um,
there. They had a family
They
there.
did. So
Because
you
there's
know,
always that connection, right, for
absolutely.
Egyptians.
No, plastic surgery was wildly behind in the South
Okay.
at the time, and I think his forward looking of making those investments, eventually got him to chief of surgery on a large part of the region out
Yeah.
there. So I think there was, kind of realizing that opportunity, if you will,
Sure.
was extremely smart on his behalf.
And your mom
But yeah,
worked as well, or
yeah,
she did?
yeah. So she had her clinics for paramedical cosmetics. So kind of what happens afterwards.
Also, it was like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
joint venture.
They were almost like a joint
Interesting.
venture, absolutely. And then both brought their work to Cairo when we decided, or when they decided that it would be best for the kids to kind of learn the
Yep.
language, the religion, and kind of put
I
their
know
roots
so
in.
many families who do that,
Yeah.
who spend their formative years or younger years in the US or wherever, and then come back to have that grounding here.
Absolutely.
You
And
know?
it's important, like, if you
Yeah.
can, I mean, obviously every situation is different, but if it's feasible
Mhm.
to upbring, your kids
Sure.
in their culture, it's
Yeah.
always favorable.
And then after university, you and your brother began a couple of businesses,
We
I
did.
think.
So we actually started in university.
Right.
So it was towards the end of my freshman year.
What did you study?
Engineering.
Engineering.
Telecommunications engineering.
So tell me about those early businesses.
Well, they all failed. So
That's
we'll
very
start with that.
I think, I think failure at that age is fantastic,
Oh,
actually.
it couldn't be better, honestly.
What did you learn from that?
A lot.
Tell me
so-
about the businesses first.
Sure. So probably the main one, which was kind of like, you could think about it as like the holding one, if you will, which we eventually sold parts of it, shut down parts, et cetera, was outsourcing. So
Yep.
the concept of, how can you engage in, work out of the US and then utilize the viability, if you will, from the services being conducted out of a country like Egypt. So, I remember.
So
probably-
manpower.
Exactly.
other words,
Exactly.
yeah.
And this has really resonated even in our investments in Amazon today. So when we first started, we started in architecture.
Oh.
So, having architectural firms that have 2D drawings and drafts that would like to get like 3D modeling out of, and that was a great business, but then you kind of realize how scalable that is.
Yeah.
I mean, you almost spent the time, like when a contract was done, to renegotiate another
Yes.
one. You kind of spend all that in marketing. So you started thinking, hey, like, how can I do this in a far more scalable manner? And one thing led to another, and the different industries that you try, and these are where like the series of failures came.
You said you had two businesses that you started, that two failed, but one then succeeded, right?
Oh no, many failed. I
Many
I
failed.
kind of lose count at this
Okay.
point. But also, I mean, I think one thing is defining what an actual business is. I mean, incorporating a company
Sure.
doesn't necessarily
Of
mean a
course,
business. So
of
I think
course.
that's
Yeah,
something I learned
yeah.
later on. And that's part of the first learning. Zero pride of ownership.
Yeah.
If you do something and it sucks, move on.
Mhm, mhm.
Like don't hold on to it. Second thing would definitely be, what you've heard me speak about a lot today, which is scale. The third one would be automation. Again, I love technology, and I love building. So if you're building anything using technology, the first and foremost thing that you're looking towards as a goal is how you're going to automate it. And this was a big learning for me, especially when you look at the access to the talent pools in a country like Egypt. You can say, hey, like, let's just put people at the problem. That's a very, very, very bad thing
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
do. Because A, you want to automate it, but then B, you want to automate the decision making behind it. As humans, we are wrong 7 out of 10
Yeah,
times.
yeah,
So the question really becomes, how can we build machines that make the decision? And then our job becomes, as I mentioned before, auditing the quality of that
right.
decision, tweaking it for that.
I want to know, so you started those businesses with your brother, correct? What is that like to work with your brother? Because I know, I mean, I don't have siblings, so I don't know, but I imagine it's it has its moments of challenge, right? What was it like?
I again was very lucky in that sense, because he does make good decisions.
He's older than you.
He's older.
I
He's
can
older.
tell by the way
Yeah.
you said
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
that.
Even if I look before the businesses, I'm usually the person in the room that's quiet in the beginning, taking a lot of
Yep.
notes, like mental notes.
Observing.
Exactly. And what I saw with my brother Kareem, and it was actually the part I was lucky on, was even growing up before the companies, you could see certain things, decisions he was making, that I thought were not okay turned out to be okay, that I thought were okay and turned out to really not be okay. And we always had our parents as a guardrail
Yep.
to kind of
It's
make
just the
sure
two of
that
you?
no. So there's also my third brother,
Okay.
Tamer.
Are you
But
the middle child?
I'm the middle
I
child,
see.
so
Okay.
so he got to learn from both of us. So he was set up
Right.
for success kind of
Yeah,
early
yeah,
on.
yeah.
But seeing those decisions being made, were probably the critical aspect of what translated later on into my career and my personal life. Working, we typically built what today we call tenants. They're probably one of the most important things that I do when I'm building a mechanism
Yeah. You
is kind
still
of
refer
agree.
back to that.
Oh, so I actually learned this later on. We were doing it in an
Yeah.
informal manner, not
Yeah, right,
realizing that we're
right.
trying to
Yeah.
build tenants. But then in Amazon, I kind
Yeah.
of learned that, hey, like these are called tenants. Huh? But the amazing part about it is it's basically guidelines of the ways of working.
Right.
And one of the things that we had was, hey, we're going to always be very transparent, very candor. Sometimes it got a little bit out of hand, but at the end of the day, we're not allowed to exit the office unless things are
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
will.
yeah.
And one thing that we learned over the course of time was that segregation of what's work and
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
personal. And I think it's extremely
It
important
is, but it's
never to
easier said than done.
much, much easier
Because
said than
I
done.
know
It took
people
us
who,
years, by the
yeah,
way.
I know people who work together, they're siblings or couple or whatever. It can be really hard.
I believe it
Yeah,
is. I
yeah,
believe it's harder,
yeah,
and
exactly.
probably more prone to
For
failure
sure.
than
I
not.
mean, something's going to fail in that
Exactly,
scenario.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think but having, again, those tenants and being very purposeful about where
Yes.
you draw the
Sure,
line.
sure.
And everyone will fail every
Of
now and then. You
course,
just
of
gotta
course,
have to bring that
of
person
course,
back and say like,
of
hey, like,
course.
remember we're going back.
Yeah. So I read I saw an interview with you, and you mentioned that your brother told you you were not cut out to be an
He
entrepreneur.
did. That was a great moment for me.
What happened there? When did he
Yeah,
say
it
that?
was hard to absorb,
What
but
when was that?
so this was right before I joined Sue,
Yep.
back in 2012. I had the chance to meet Ronaldo Mshahwar, who's our leader and our vice president for Amazon
And he's a
for
big
Munich.
mentor for you, I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, again, when I say that I'm lucky in my job, probably one of the big reasons is getting to work,
Yeah.
closely with Ronnie and for Ronnie, just because you're able to again observe the quality of the decision making, and kind of hold that high bar for
Yeah.
yourself and your teams based on the learnings you get from them accordingly. So this was around the time where we had started talking. I was quite infatuated with the
Mhm.
world of online shopping. Had already engaged in the customer service days of my company,
Yes.
serving online shopping sites in the U.S., etc. So I really wanted to get involved into that. But then you have to be, as we were talking, today I'm able to be in a position where I reflect on the decisions the day before. back then things,
Or faster.
well, it almost seems like less organized. So
Sure.
in your mind, yes,
Yes.
more dynamic,
Yes.
etc. But in reality, it's just less organized.
Right. Right.
And we were kind of reflecting and again having that transparency, and really bringing out the older brother card, if you will. I was asking him like, hey, like, it looks like this opportunity is going to open up. Is it right for me or not? Because mind you, like my first employment was for 2 weeks, and I said this is not going to work, and I just walked out.
You quickly realized it
I
wasn't for
didn't
you.
like it.
Yeah.
So instead of quitting the company, I quit the function and
Right.
hopped into business
Sure.
development, which I
Sure.
did with them for years,
Sure.
which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I like interacting with people,
Yeah. Yeah.
having conversations, building
Yes.
actual relationships
Yes.
versus
Yes.
like, task A, your PCB
And
board
you're in a room on
lit
your
and
own.
it did
Yeah.
its part,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
I don't like waiting for a bulb to just light up.
When the souk.com opportunity came up, your brother felt it was a good move for you.
Yeah, so he was very clear and purposeful again with that transparency and candor, and said, look, the quality of the decisions you're making today have kind of plateaued.
Interesting.
You need to pick up more learnings
Yeah.
that are going to help you make better judgment calls over the course of the future.
So maybe being in a large organization was a good place
Absolutely.
to do
and
that.
getting the inspiration from. So mind you,
Yeah.
like we were not very large in Sue at that
Yes.
time, but the direction was very clear. The vision that Ronnie and the other leaders within the organization had was super clear. And I think just getting into something of that at that stage was definitely a very lucky thing
What
for me.
did you like and dislike about the previous sort of startup style businesses you were doing? And was there anything from that you took to Souk and felt that was, was there an element also of that startup feel? Because I remember that time.
Absolutely.
And it did feel that this was all very, pushing the boundaries at the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's probably where something like Sue and a leader like Ronnie just made so much sense, because it really, really was as startup as you can get in terms of the decisions that we're making. But then one thing that went on through that journey, and again, I think is really amazing about working at Amazon, is we have what we call a day one culture.
Yes.
And
what is that? Explain that to me. I don't understand what that is.
So when you look at what teams call bureaucracy, having to wait for a meeting to submit an idea, to get an approval.
That bureaucratic feel to it.
Absolutely. That's what we call day two. That means we're already dying as an organization.
Okay.
And that's where, we spoke earlier about like two-way door decisions, and me not wanting to be involved or even know about them.
Yep.
That empowerment within your culture to push the boundaries of innovation, to serve and delight customers, is what we call day one. So the second anyone really within an organization sees a day two signal,
factor.
absolutely, it's that passion to build.
Yes.
That kind of green light to build.
Yeah.
And when you see these blockers start to come out, and they come out in different shapes and forms, right? It could be through people, through processes. So how do you kind of break that? So if we're looking, and we built a mechanism that we thought was a good guardrail to protect, part of our customer base or our investments, but then you realize it's kind of slowing the decision making down. You have to pause and say, hey, like, if this is a day two signal, let's break it. You get me? Let's change the process. So, I think that's really, it started off from the many startups that we failed on. It was definitely the culture within Sue. And I think when Amazon came in, doing a buy versus build made a lot of sense, because those leadership principles that we've been talking about really resonated with our values in Sue. So that's where everything just kind of made sense. And you can see it in the day-to-day with things like a day one mental model, if you will.
Do you consider what you're doing now? Because I kind of feel it has a startup feel.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because of the innovation element to the brand, that there's constantly, whether it's new products, new ways of reaching customers, but there is a feeling of a startup all the time. Do you feel that with
Absolutely.
the work?
And you want to be very dramatically freaked out about it in your day-to-day.
What do you mean?
In a nutshell, and just to kind of reflect some of that drama, you have to look at any company,
Yeah.
including Amazon,
Yeah.
as a company that very well will die one day. And the only thing that really keeps it alive
Is your panic.
is that panic
Yeah.
of consistently wanting and actually innovating.
Yeah.
So if we have something that's working good for us today, that's great. Tomorrow it won't be as applicable.
Of
So the
course.
second you get it working today, be satisfied, and
Enjoy it
and
for the day
grateful.
and move on.
But then you have to continuously innovate on it, because if you don't innovate on it over the course
Yeah.
of time, we've seen amazing companies historically that were everything for us back in our days,
Of course.
and they don't exist today.
Of course.
And it's that lack of ability
But
to
that can
continuously
bring us
innovate.
back to what you've been talking about from the very beginning, which is automation, right?
Absolutely.
How is Amazon as a company proposing to train this new future generation? Do you guys have some kind of program? Are you recruiting people to teach them how to work in these new with these new tools?
So Amazon is what we call a self-serve company.
Right.
So essentially, all of us as Amazonians are given all the tools we need
Yeah.
to develop ourselves.
Right.
And those tools can be the ability for me in the current role that I'm in to say, you know what, hey, I want to go teach myself to be an engineer out of the US or somewhere in Europe or somewhere in India. So that access to learn
Yeah.
and kind of leverage,
Right.
if you will, all that know-how
Yeah.
of, some almost 30 years of
But
operating.
apart from the employees, are you doing any kind of program for future?
Absolutely. So if you even look at, something like even in Egypt,
Yeah.
for instance, we've over the course of the last couple of years have launched our different internship programs.
Right.
Early on in university or even MBAs, where they come engage with us for a period of about 6 months to get access to all these things, to learn all these things. And honestly,
I'll
the
send you my
demand in the
children.
region, oh, please do. The demand in the region has been phenomenal. And not just the region, but particularly in Egypt
Yeah.
as well, where you
It
kind of
becomes like a school in
absolutely.
itself.
And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the roles that companies like the Amazons of the world really need to do to serve the communities that
sure.
they're doing. So it's
For
not just
sure.
about buying and selling. And I think, to be honest, Amazon does that very well.
Good. But you
and will
guys don't talk
continuously
about
improve.
it enough.
So absolutely, because when again, remember we spoke about that scale, right?
Yes.
So the moment this opens up, it's kind of filled up.
I
So
see.
then you're not catering enough. So how do you kind of take it back, rebuild it for scale? Your forecasting was off if in that case, and build a mechanism that can actually serve everyone before you say, hey, I have this and I can do this.
Yeah, but on a more sort of communications level, it would be great to hear about these kinds
Absolutely,
of
when it's
programs
when
that
it's
you're
at that
doing.
scale.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
get me?
yeah, yeah,
Where you can almost operate unconstrained.
Right.
So the model, whether this one or any model we engage, we always make sure is going to be sustainable, has a
Sure,
line of sight,
sure.
et cetera, et cetera.
Of course.
But then, before you start shouting out that, hey, like we're here,
Yeah,
you need to be able to
of course.
cater to them,
And to
right?
maintain it long term.
Exactly.
I want to hear a bit about your cultural life, your hobbies. What do you do in your spare time? I know you like to go to the gym, but what else do you do? Do you like to travel? Do you like
Love
to
traveling. There was a saying that I'm actually not aligned with, but I hear it a lot. Like, what was it? Work hard,
and
play hard.
Yeah.
Exactly. The way I
Well, you
look at
can't
it.
play hard if you go to sleep at 9:30 at night.
Well,
But he's playing
the
hard.
weekend can be a bit different. The way I look at it is work hard so you can play whenever you want to.
Fair
right?
enough.
In the house, or like, my personal mental model, that part is traveling. So when you look at it in terms of what you get to learn personally, I can't think of anything else that kind of beats that travel, in sense of going to different countries and kind of understanding the different cultures. And I like good food, so just being able to test out kind of the different cuisines around the world is super, super important, because that is whereby you start building these relationships, right? Whether it's, with the friends that, in a very close circle you bring.
And
I
you
think
travel with friends?
I do,
Yeah.
but you have to be extremely picky
Yeah, I
on that
agree.
one.
But
I think,
it's interesting because we travel with a small group of friends.
right.
and it works. But, because we've tried it a few times and it's comfortable and we like to do the
Absolutely.
same things, but it's not for everyone.
It's not.
And you
It
can't
really is
just,
not.
no.
Yeah. And,
Yeah,
and I think the different destinations with the different people also plays a
that's
factor,
right.
right? Because you want everyone to be able to do what she
Sure,
or he likes.
sure.
And
There's a growing trend now, and I think it's a post-COVID thing, that people now are shunning material things. They don't want houses and cars and all that stuff. They want to travel.
yeah.
They want to feel things. They want to experience things.
Well, I mean, you
And
just think about what life was like
well,
when you were locked
exactly.
down.
And I feel that that's very much the case for so many. I feel like that.
Absolutely.
And I know a lot of people, that's where they want to
Absolutely.
spend their
I
time.
love cooking
Yeah,
as well. I'm not good at it,
right.
but
But it's fun.
I do.
But it's fun.
My
Yeah.
wife kind of took that one on, even though when we got married for the first almost 10 years, she never cooked anything. I was the only one that was cooking
Oh,
at the
really?
house.
Oh,
But yeah,
interesting.
she apparently has a really good art for it because she is really
Nice.
good at it. So now I get the
Yeah.
barbecue. And that one I
Okay,
like.
not
So at
bad.
least I still have like
That's
a
fun.
little domain.
And it's social.
Absolutely, absolutely,
And it's social,
absolutely.
which
No, I
is
mean
fun as
you could
well.
almost get to
Yeah.
a point where you just like you have one or two friends over, or just my son and I, and we're just
Absolutely.
going at
Absolutely.
that one. So I think just kind of like
Absolutely.
slowing things down to clear the mind.
Yeah.
But whatever you do,
Yeah.
whether it's travel, cooking, blah 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 blah,
Yeah.
just being there, like actually being there, exactly,
Being
is
present.
is super important because
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to fail a lot at that. So you'd almost like checklist the activity, right? But you're not mentally there. And I think that realization was a big moment for me.
But I think that's the case with a lot of people who are prioritizing their careers, right? They make that the be all and end all. To
Doesn't
everything
matter at
else
the end
goes
though.
in secondary. Yeah, which is
Honestly,
not
the
great.
older you go, you realize, that's not
Of course,
what counts. So,
of course,
so I
of
think,
course.
just that learning a few years back that if you're going to do something, actually do it. You get me?
Yeah. What countries on your bucket list?
On the bucket list, there's quite a few.
Have you been to Japan?
I have.
I'm
It's
dying
actually
to.
my favorite
It's
country
on
out of
my
all. Like if you ask
list.
me or my wife or my son, we will give you the same answer
I'm
every
gonna
time.
need to take your address book
And
because I'm dying
and
to
you're
go.
gonna need at least 12 to 14 days
I
on that one.
heard. I heard. I
It's
thought I was told 2 weeks.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, but it's just absolutely lovely. And it's crazy how efficient
Yeah.
the whole country operates. It's just mind
And of
blowing.
course, you're thinking Amazon, Amazon. How do I do
Absolutely,
that?
absolutely. I mean, because it tells you like, you'll get off the train, but take train number 4 because that's 10 steps away from the stairs that will take you to the
Yeah,
exit you
yeah.
want. Like, it's just crazy.
It's insane.
And if you ask me on a bucket list, and this one I think will only happen whenever I retire or go on a sabbatical, is Latin America.
Oh yeah.
Dying to go, but that one really needs a lot of time. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a whole continent.
It is. I've been. I went once
you
for
have, huh?
work over 20 years ago.
That must have been
It
crazy.
was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's such a diverse continent.
Exactly.
Everyone just lumps them together.
It's not.
Like Africa, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm going to Africa.
We get that every
You
time.
know? Anyway, one final question. If you were age 80, looking back, what would be your legacy? What would you want someone to say, that was what he was amazing at, that's what he did well, that's what he's going to be remembered for?
There was a line that really resonated with me. Leaders, and you could almost think about like removing the term leaders, but people that would have some sort of a legacy, create more than what they consume.
Interesting. It's a nice way to put it.
Absolutely. And you think about like the thought process behind it. It speaks to many, many things. So whatever that you consume or leave back can be in many industries, can be many types, I mean, etc. For me, the biggest part of that was actually putting countries that are emerging, like the Egypts of the world, on the same level playing field as the rest of the world. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to get an education abroad.
Yeah.
And again, what it helped with wasn't that the quality's higher. It's that ability to make decisions.
And the confidence to make decisions.
And
maybe.
the failures that build that confidence to make the decisions. If I look at it today, if I have the opportunity, I'd like to give the same opportunity to my son. I'd hope he'd like to do the same for my grandson or granddaughter. I would like, before our time's up, to leave it to where that opportunity could be in a country like Egypt.
Yeah, where we can find it here. Yeah. That was amazing, Omar.
I mean,
I
thank you.
really, really enjoyed
I
it.
really enjoyed this.
I really
honestly.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like
I
you put like a new benchmark on podcasts.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
you're so sweet.
Honestly, I loved it.